know that the thing that's going on over there look like can be preventable. Father, you know you can take care of it and just have mercy upon us. And then, Father, we go with the one that's being affected by the weather, the fire, or whatever. But whatever they need, Father, just grant it in the name of Jesus. Then look down on the one that seemed unconcerned today, Father. Turn around for them and ask them to make. Let them know, Father, you God beside you there, Lord. And just have mercy upon us. And then, Father, we come to study your word this morning. Father, I pray that we'll be able to understand the word and apply it in our daily lives. That we'll be more Christ-like, Father. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for that. Okay. Our lesson this morning is lesson 4, if I'm not mistaken, lest we forget. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to read the, excuse me, read the key verse, the Deuteronomy 8, 1 through 11 is the focus scripture, but the key verse, it says, take care that you do not forget the Lord your God by failing to keep his commandments, his ordinance, and his statutes, which I am commanding you today. And that's Deuteronomy 8 and 11. Lest we forget. Strong title. And I read through this last night, and what was really, my mind was all over the place when I read it. A couple of reasons why my mind was all over the place when I read it. I don't know how many of you have been looking at the confirmation hearings for Judge Jackson. When did that vote?
I'm not sure when it is. I think she done met with everybody.
Yeah, she's met with everybody, and I think she's got enough votes. But it was all over the place because looking at some of the senators, Ted Cruz's and all of that, how nasty they were. And then I saw a report saying after he did it, they could see him on Facebook and Instagram searching his name to see what people were saying. Doing it for a show. I get nasty for a show. And it makes me realize that there are some folk out there, they don't care about you. They're just doing stuff to mistreat you because they can. Because they know somebody out there is going to like the way they're mistreating you. And we have to get to the point that we can't forget where we come from. We can't forget about our past. I saw something, and I'm trying to pull it up. And I try to pull it up, but it had about 5 different age groups. It said men in their 60s or 70s remember some, and they went all the way down to each age group. Then when they got to the men in their 20s, they're taught to forget. We're at the point in life and in history that we're at a crucial point. And we've always said this, we're at a crucial point in time. We're at a crucial point in the church. But more especially, we're at a crucial time for our black race. Because our kids are being taught to forget who Martin Luther King was. They're being taught to forget who Malcolm X was, who Emmett Till, who Rosa Parks, Medgar Evers. They're taught to forget George Washington Carver. They're taught to forget all of that stuff because when we were in school, and I don't know how it is now, Sister Linda might have to help with this. Some of our teachers during history, they moved that book aside and said, let me teach you some other stuff. Let's teach some Black history stuff, not only on Black History Month. They incorporated some of that stuff, but now the schools are so focused on the test that our history is not important because our history is not a part of a test. Mm-hmm. Then when we look at the reason why it used to be, when we look at it, and be careful what it sounds. Actually, I don't care. I'm just going to say it. Even the church It's getting to the point that we're moving away from our history because Sunday school, when you had Sunday school, it was made for those that didn't have schooling. So they came, not only got taught the Bible, they got taught math, reading, history, and all that. But we're at the point now, I'm glad we're getting back into the Southern culture and the case studies because we're trying to reteach our history again. But even churches are going away from our black culture and our black history. So when we look at Deuteronomy here, it says, look at that first thing, least we forget. Least we forget. And we've had conversations, I think, here at the church about how things used to be. How, you know, the Sunday dinners, everybody used to gather at mom or grandma house or somebody's house for Sunday dinner. How we and I see it still happen because I hear brother Rivers always asking Sister Cena, "What you cooking today?" Right? I'm coming over. Right? And it's not only them two; it's throughout the church. So we still have them old values that we cook. But what happens when the Sister Sims can't cook no more? Right? I know her daughter, but she'll cook. RJ will probably get in the kitchen and try to, you know, she said nobody else gonna cook, he gonna, right? I know for me, Jasmine could get in the kitchen and cook. Kale, I see him on Instagram now he got married, he trying to cook. Precious, she'll get in there and do, I don't know how much she'll cook, but she'll get in there and do stuff, right? So we've tried, I've tried, along to help my mom and dad and all that, passed down at least something for the next generations, right? But our question is that I wrestle with is: are we doing enough? Are we doing enough? And I believe that was the same question our ancestors asked themselves: are they doing enough? But I think the difference is when we ask the question sitting down, not doing nothing. When they asked the question, they asked it while they were doing something. You know, we asked the question, but what are we doing about the question? They asked the question and was doing something about the question because their ancestors told them about how they were treated. Their ancestors told them a lot of the history, and it got passed down and passed down. So, keeping that in mind, I do need to dig into to this the Bible the lesson. And actually, I wasn't going to do it, but let me read all 11 verses. Deuteronomy 8 through 11. This entire commandment that I commanded you today, you must diligently observe so that you may live and increase and go in and occupy the land that the Lord promised on oath to your ancestors. Remember the long way that the Lord your God has led you through 40 years in the wilderness in order to humble you, testing you to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep his commandments. He humbled you by letting you hunger, then by feeding you with manna, with which neither you nor your ancestors were acquainted, in order to make you understand that one does not live off bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. The clothes on your back did not wear out, and your feet did not swell these 40 years. Know then in your heart that as a parent disciplines a child, so the Lord your God disciplines you. Therefore, keep the commandments of the Lord your God by walking in his ways and by fearing him. For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land with flowing streams, with springs and underground waters, welling up in valleys and hills, A land of wheat and barley, of vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey. A land where you may eat bread without severity, where you will lack nothing, a land whose stones are iron and from whose hills you may mine copper. You shall eat your fill of bless. You shall eat your fill and bless the Lord your God for the good land that He has given you. Then 11, take care that you do not forget the Lord your God by failing to keep His commandments, His ordinance, and His statutes, which I am commanding you today. When we look at that and kind of what we just talked about, not only is it our duty to remember our forefathers, it is our commandment to remember what God has done for us and for them in our lives and their lives, but also the commandments of God. It's our duty as Christians to remember how to treat others. We cannot forget. We got to love our neighbor as ourselves. We can't forget that we're supposed to pray for our enemies. We can't forget that man born of a woman and go a few short days and full of trouble. We can't forget that. We can't afford to forget that. And when we look at that, because all of us are adults, all of us have got bills. There are some things in our lives, some bills we can't afford to forget to pay. There are some things we can't just afford to forget, because if we forget it, nobody else in the house is going to remember it. If we forget it, nobody else in the house is going to do it. And so there are some things we can't not afford to forget. And truthfully, in times like this, with gas prices, you can't afford not to forget to get gas and let your car get all the way on E. Especially if you're going out of town, because you might have enough money to do that because you car. And so we can't afford to forget. We can't. And it tells us in the story that there's a price to pay when you forget. But when you remember, there's even a bigger blessing. It says right here in the introduction, and I'm not reading the whole introduction. It says, if you're looking, the prophets continue to show concern that the people would regress and be lured to pagan practices, which led to their previous demise. This book, entitled Deuteronomy, essentially reinforces God's law to instill ordinance and righteous behavior among God's people. Deuteronomy serves as a stern reminder of God's chosen people of their responsibility to obey God's law. The prophets during that time, the writers of Deuteronomy, had a feeling that the people would digress. And guess what? The people did digress, because we've been talking about them going back home, going back into Jerusalem for the last three weeks in Bible Discovery Hour. We've gone through an Exodus experience, and they ain't even made it out of slavery yet, and they still are fighting for Moses. They're still fighting. So it seems like all the way through history, we have the ability, we have the inability to keep our eyes on the Lord. For some reason, we always allow something or someone to take our focus off of the Lord. And it said right there, the prophets continue to show concern that the people would regress and be lured to pagan practices. We are sometimes lured to pagan practices. And truthfully, can I just be honest with you when we look at certain stuff? When we look at Easter, the Easter bunny, pagan practice. When we look at Valentine's Day, the chocolates and all of that, pagan practice. Even I could go a step further when we look at Christmas itself. We've taken Christ out of it, and pagan practices get mad when people don't give us what we want. The gifts, right? Pagan practices. So it's so easy to get distracted and not realize the meaning of the seasons, the meaning of Easter, the meaning of Christmas, the meaning of Valentine's, even Halloween. Pagan practice, right? You have church folk dressing up as devils, goons, and goblins, and think they're supposed to come to the church, and the church supposed to give them candy. Pagan, right? And get mad when the pastor say, we're not celebrating no Halloween, we're not dressing up with no Halloween, we're not decorating no Halloween stuff. And get mad. Get mad when the pastor tells the congregation, I know y'all been doing this for a long time, but we will not have a Christmas play with Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer sung. We not having no Frosty the Snowman sung. Well, Brad, that's the way it's always been. But Frosty and Rudolph ain't nowhere in the Bible. Right? So, you know, we have to be careful. We have to be careful because just that moment, and I'm not saying none of that, you can't go out with your kids and celebrate Halloween. You can't go trick or treat with your kids. But remember, what do you say? Trick or what? Treat. So people are tricking more than treating now, right? Because you remember my mom and granddad and all of them, you said, boy, you can't eat all of that candy. We need to go through it and all of that. But guess what? The neighborhoods we went in was our neighborhood. And the candy that we couldn't eat was because it was sitting there since last Halloween. They gave us, and it's a little old. They weren't trying to hurt us, right? That's just what they had left over, right? But now you got people intentionally putting stuff in candies and all of that. So, but guess what? We asked for it because we said trick or treat. So I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with. I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with celebrating Christmas, Easter. I'm not saying there's nothing wrong because we even had Easter eggs. But we try to let the people know what Easter, the real meaning of it is, right? So there's nothing wrong with it, but we got to realize who is behind it, right? We got to make sure when we look at when we look at Valentine's, they do the history of Saint Valentine, see who he really was, right? When we're looking at all of this, do your history to make sure, because what? We can't afford to forget. We can't afford in today's society, truthfully, to get it wrong because we're misinformed. There's no reason why we should get something wrong because we are misinformed. We have too many avenues to get to a logical decision, if that's the word I'm looking for. Right? Even when we look at the elections now, that's what I'm leading to. When we look at the elections now, we can't afford to have uninformed decisions when we go to the poll. We don't have that luxury to have uninformed decisions. Other people might. We don't have that luxury. So we have to do our research. We have to do our due diligence to get all the information. We got to do our due diligence to make sure we don't forget where we come from. We don't forget how they didn't want us to vote. And then when they passed the voter right law, that they put stuff in place that still try to keep us from voting. They put poll taxes in place to try to keep us from voting. They try to make us know how to redo this, read that, write this, to keep us from voting. And we take all that for granted and just go and just mark stuff. Mm-hmm. Not forgetting, not remembering what our ancestors went through. Mm-hmm. Not remembering that. know, it's good to have the luxury to be able to walk into a building and sit in the bike by choice. It's good to have that luxury to be able to walk in a building and sit in the bike by choice. But our ancestors didn't have that. So every now and then when we walk in, we should be proud to walk way all the way up to the front.
Amen.
I'm going to sit right here in the front. Why? Because I can. Because I can. It amazes me, you know, and that's just society. That's everybody. The place is up from the bike up. Nobody wants to sit. That's just cause the front, But guess what? If you sit in the front, you ain't got to worry about the distractions from the back. All right? You sit in the front, and somebody come, you got in the back door, that mean no good. You got the first row. You get out of here, right? But we can't afford to forget where we come from, right? The writers of Deuteronomy was trying to remind the people where they came from. But also, what they tried to do is remind the people in the midst of their situations, in the midst of their circumstances, the Lord kept them. The Lord still kept them. Because think about this. And we've talked about it and you've heard it. The 40 years in the wilderness. The 40 years. They were in the wilderness for them 40 years, not because of God's punishment, right? It was because of their own wrongdoing, right? So it wasn't because, well, let me rephrase that. It wasn't that God was condemning them. It was God was humbling them. So it wasn't even a punishment. It was a humbling experience. Sometimes we got to realize it's not a punishment that God is giving us, it's a humbling experience. Sometimes we need to be humble. Amen. And sometimes, unfortunately, that humbleness comes at the expense of something. Sometimes we get too, you know, high and almighty. You know, our president is, the son said our president is black. Our president is black. Well, guess what? You got a little too high and mighty, so let me humble you a little bit and realize that you didn't say nothing about God in all of this. Took your focus off God because before you had a black president, it was you praying to me, asking me, God, can you give somebody that looks like me? God, can you? And then I gave it to you, and you forgot it. Let me humble you for 4 years. Right? What punishment? It was truly a humbling experience. Right? It was an experience for me. For me, Sister Sims. It was a humbling experience when that man was in the White House. It was a humbling experience for me. Why is that? Twofold. Being a veteran. I take pride in the chain of command. Right? That man was the commander-in-chief of a military that I once served in. So I still look at him as my commander-in-chief. Right? That's a humbling experience to look at somebody and call them your commander-in-chief, knowing that they don't like you. It's a humbling experience knowing they don't care for you. And if they could, they would probably shoot you in the back quicker than anybody else. It's a humbling experience, but the other fold of that, as a pastor, as a child of God, it's a humbling experience knowing that I got to practice what I preach. And I got to pray for my enemy. And not prayer, a sincere prayer. It's a humbling experience when you realize the word says that there are going to be people that's placed in authority over you. And you might not necessarily agree with, but guess what? You got to submit yourself to those that have authority over you. You got to humble yourself to those that have authority over you. And this man was the leader of the free world. He was the leader of our country. I didn't vote for him. But guess what? They voted him in. And since this is a democracy and I fought for the right of freedom, for the right of speech, no matter what it is, it was a humbling experience. A very humbling experience. Was it a punishment? No. It felt like one. Woo, it felt like one. But it was a humbling experience because, as Deuteronomy reminds us, in them 4 years that he was in office, my cup never ran dry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it went empty. It went back, it had a little drop in it, but it didn't run dry. Right? Stuff happened. It was some hard times, but I never went naked. It was some hard times, but I never went hungry. It was some hard times, but I never went without. So it wasn't a punishment, it was a humbling experience. Because truthfully, when you think about it, when you're punished, something is taken away from you. Right? Nothing was taken away from them. When we look at the children of Israel, nothing was taken away from them. They just weren't given what they were promised at that time. They didn't make it to the promised land, but guess what? It wasn't taken away from them because they still got it. And not only that, when they were hungry, the Lord still, because His grace and mercy, gave them food. And because they were wandering around and He was trying to humble them, He took their focus off of little stuff. They didn't have to worry about clothes. 40 years wandering around. Didn't even have to make a stitch to a clothes. Didn't have to expand it. Didn't have to take it up. Didn't have to wash it. Didn't have to. Clothes didn't get wore out. 40 years. Feet. They never sweat. Because we got to think about it. Because when we think about the 40 years, they walk around with the clothes. But we got to remember during that time, there weren't really that many shoes. Right? It wasn't that. How many times have you walked for a mile in some shoes and your feet are swollen up? Right? Now imagine walking that same mile without shoes on. Now, I ain't talking about when we were growing up. Because, all of us ran around barefooted. We didn't know what shoes was when we were growing up. We didn't got soft in our old age. We used to run around all day barefooted. Now we can't even walk from one room to the other barefooted. We had to go some slippers. So 40 years, their feet didn't swell. 40 years. For 40 years, they were wandering around and didn't go hungry. They had some hungry moments, but they didn't go hungry. 40 years, they didn't thirst. They had some thirsty moments, but they weren't thirsty. We have the moments where we're hungry, but we didn't go hungry. If y'all understand if y'all get what I'm saying. Right? All of us right now probably sitting in here stomach might be growling because we're ready to talk about food right now. You're ready to know you talk. You need to hush so I can get you.
Amen.
My brother can't go hungry. By the time he leaves him, he's going to get it. So we find ourselves in situations, but the Lord still blesses us.
Amen.
Right? Because we know what it feels like to be hungry. Right? And because we know that hunger, we're going to do everything we can to make sure we never go without. We're going to do everything we can, even if it's just some bread and water. We will make a mayonnaise sandwich and be fine with it.
Amen.
And what's crazy, watch this. Just because I can, Sister Linda Norman to bring it up. During the fast when I wasn't eating meat, well, I'm still not. One of my favorite things was a tomato sandwich. A tomato sandwich. A tomato sandwich.
Oh, no.
Tomato sandwich. And it's not. And the thing was, Sister Brett, I could have ate something else. I had choices, but that's what I wanted. Now, if that was the only thing, I probably wouldn't have wanted it, right? When you look at the children of Israel, they had that manna for so long. When they first got it, they loved it, right? But because they had it over and over again, they didn't want it no more. And not realizing the Lord was giving them exactly what they needed. Because that bread provided all the nourishment that they needed. You look at the 5 basic food groups, it was all there in one. But we're so caught up on stuff that we don't have all the time that we don't realize the Lord is blessing us with what we have.
Mm-hmm.
But what we have, we go out and look for stuff that we don't have. And this ties back into, this is the reason why we can't forget. When we look at that, Brother River said, the woman with the issue of blood, 12 years. 12 years, she went to everybody else. Right? 12 years. She went to everybody else. Now, what I ask the question to myself, and it's probably something I need to research, did she heal Jesus before them 12 years? Because Jesus had to walk that way before. Or was she just not focused on Jesus because she put her trust in everything else? Till it got to the point where all she can do is depend on the Lord. Because some of us, if we just look at it from that standpoint, a lot of us, we trust in a lot of stuff. We put pagan practices in practice, and to the point to where when they don't work, all we have is to depend on the Lord.
Amen.
And he puts us in situations where all we can do is depend on him. So guess what? We can't forget about this young lady with the issue of blood. Because some of us ain't got to bleed for 12 long years spiritually. All we got to do is just realize we just got to reach out and touch the skirts of his garment. We can't afford to forget. When we look at the widow that went to Elijah, that RJ talked about on Second Sunday, she went to him and said, I have nothing. I have nothing. And watch this. She sold everything she had to try to get out of debt. Right? All I have is just this little oil. Just this little oil. Elijah said, take that little oil, get a vessel, and start pouring. And don't stop until all of them are full. Have enough. All right? We can't afford to forget that the Lord will take a little and make a lot. We can't afford to forget that. We can't afford to forget that. All right? But watch this, something we can't afford to forget. Because we look over what this widow's husband did to her. He left her in debt. We can't afford to forget that we need to go and make sure we got life insurance policies, that we go and make sure our stuff is in order so our children won't be left fighting for our 3 cents when we leave. Right? We can't afford to forget. Right? We can't get caught up on the paganness of this world. We got to always be willing and striving to see Christ in any situation and in any person. No matter how bad it is, Brother so put it, better days are coming. So we got to be able to see Christ through any situation because we are a child of God. And he said, love thy neighbor as thyself. And don't put no other gods before him. So if I'm doing that, I got to be able to train myself, to train my mind, to see Christ in anything. Because this world will come and blindside you quick. This world will come, you got your eyes on the prize. You got your eyes on the prize, and all of a sudden, the prize that way, and you looking this way. This way, because this world will hit you quick. So I'm not saying that you know you ain't gonna have them times where your eyes is not on the prize. You're gonna have them times where the world is gonna change your focus. The world is gonna change your view. But the question is, once you realize your view is changed, what do you do? What do you do? Because every now and then, all of us go in the wrong direction. Right? All of us. If you drove somewhere, you've turned down the wrong street or went the wrong direction. And don't know you're going in the wrong direction. But what do you do when you realize you're going in the wrong direction? Do you keep going in that wrong direction? Fussing? Because you got it? Or you stop, turn around and find your way back? In spiritual life, we're going to go down the wrong direction. But what do we do when we realize we're going the wrong way? We should stop, recalculate, turn around, and get back on track. Sometimes it's going to take a little time. Because if you're on the interstate and you get off the interstate going the wrong way, and you realize you're going the wrong way, or better yet, I ain't gonna say that. You get on the interstate going the wrong way. It might be 6 or 7 miles before there's another exit before you could get off and get back on the right way. All right? It might be a while. All right? But guess what? You do it, and all it does is just delays you from getting to where you were going. But where you were going is still there. When we look at tying this back into Deuteronomy and tying it back into the people, what the writers was trying to get the people to understand, you went in the wrong direction. But while you were going in the wrong direction, the Lord still had you. While you were going in the wrong direction, the Lord still kept you. It shouldn't have took you but 3 weeks to a month to get from the Red Sea to the Promised Land. It should have took you more than a month to get there. But because of your inability to be humble, it took 40 years for me to humble y'all. And then, after we thought you were humbled and it was time, because I couldn't keep allowing you to walk in the wilderness because I would have broke my promise. So the Lord has said, I'm going to give you the promised land, but you need to remember my commandments. Mm-hmm. Because the Lord is going to be true to us, even when we're not true to Him. Mm-hmm. All right? The Lord is going to be true to us because He had a promise, and He will never break His promise. All right? He told the ancestors, he told Abraham, Jacob, and Isaac that your ancestors will inherit a land flowing with milk and honey. Mm-hmm. So He knew when they got over there, it wasn't going to be flowing milk and honey no more because they're going to tear everything up. Right? How many times you given your child a toy or something, and in the back of your mind, you already say, I already know this little Negro going to tear it up. I already know they're going to tear it up, but what do? You give it to them anyway. The Lord, because that's who we are, because of our love for them, we want them to experience some joy. And even though we know a month later the baby dog gonna be born because it had a full head of hair, gonna be born and all of that. The Tonka toy gonna have no wheels on it. If it's a remote control, it's gonna be taken apart. We already know it. But the joy that they have on their face when we give it to them, the joy they have on their face when they destroy it. Right? All right. The Lord knows what we're going to do. But the joy He has in giving it to us, because the promise He made to us. Mm-hmm. But we still can't forget. We can't forget. For 40 years. 40 years. Imagine, how long does it take to get from here to Panama City? About an hour. About an hour. Imagine you leaving here, church, right now. It's what, 9? It's 10:15. You leave church at 10:15 to get to Panama City. You should get to Panama City at about 11:15. You don't get to Panama City till 11:15 and 20:45. An hour trip. You don't get there. But on the way there, in them 20 years, because that's just about 20 years, you never had to stop for gas. You never had to stop for food. But it just took you that long. Oh, never had to get the oil change. Never had to get new tires on the car. Car didn't break down. Yeah, you fussing because it took you that long. But the Lord still kept you. Mm-hmm. So when we see stuff like that, I know I'm going off subject, but when we see stuff like that, that's the kind of mindset I want us to get in. How would it relate to us today? All right? Matter of fact, let's do it this way, because all of us have did this, to walk to our mailbox, to your mailbox. It don't take that long to walk to your mailbox. Imagine walking to your mailbox and when you get back to your house, it's 20 years later. maybe a 3-minute walk at the most, right? Some of it ain't even a minute walk, but we made it a 3 minute because we got to convince ourselves to walk to the middle. We have mailbox, then we look and say it's too cold, it's too hot, I'll go later. Then you know what, I got to go to the store, Sister Brett. I just stopped by the mailbox on the way to the store. All right? But imagine, right? That's the mindset, a simple task, right? A simple task. And not throw in, it was because you weren't humble enough to get to your mailbox and back to your house in time. Right? It's a simple task. Just going from one place to another. And all you got to do is believe in the Lord. All you have to do is follow His commandments, follow His statutes. And He's even made it more simple for us. It's just two that we need to follow. Because if we follow them two, all the other ones are covered. Because if I love my neighbor as I love myself, I love myself enough so I'm not going to put a gun to my head and shoot myself, so thou shalt not kill. I love myself enough that I'm not going to steal from my own self. I might hide the money from myself and not remember where it is. And I ain't even hiding it, I just put it somewhere. But I ain't steal it from myself, thou shalt not kill. Right? I'm not going to lie on myself, to myself, or sometimes. I don't know. Some people do. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Right? So when we look at all of that, because I'm loving myself, right? Put no other gods before me. If I ain't putting no other gods before Him, I will not bow down or serve them or worship anything else because I ain't putting anything before Him. It's them too. Everything falls in line. So we can't forget the commandments that the Lord has given us. Two things that we're out of here with telling the Bible story. With a direct command, the sacred writers clearly stated that the people must obey the laws in their entirety. Entirety, not one part of it, not this, you know, how we'll pick the Bible verses we want to use. We'll pick stuff that we want to adhere to, right? We'll pick that stuff and be focused on that. I would say eye for eye, tooth for a tooth. You did it to them, do it to you. What about what Jesus said? Who? What He said. Right? We'll pick the stuff. You know, a drunkard say, don't the Bible say drink ye all of it? So guess what? I drunk ye all of it. But the Bible also says it should be no drunkenness. Right? We pick what we want to do, you know, and there's you know, when we look at in certain churches, when we talk about the women dress and all of that, we talk about there shouldn't be no woman in the pulpit, or women shouldn't wear certain clothes and all of that. But it also says you shouldn't mix linens, so you shouldn't wear cotton with silk or something. You're sinning. Bible says that, but hey, you just pick what you want, right? This will get a lot of us. Bible also says in the law, you should eat certain shellfish. So oysters, shrimp, crab. That's why I say some of us, right? Can't do it. Can't do it, right? So you got to be careful because it's all the law. That's why Jesus said, "I didn't come to condemn the law. I came to fulfill the law." So now we took all of that other stuff, Deuteronomy, the law in Numbers and all of that, and put it on Jesus' back and said, now all you need to do is love that neighbor as you love yourself. Put no other gods before me. All this mixed linen and all of that, I fulfilled that law because y'all couldn't do it. Right? But guess what? We can't forget. We can't forget. And the problem is, the people wasn't obeying the law in its entirety. That's one of the reasons why Jesus had to come. Because the people took the law and made it about themselves. They took the law and made it a monopoly where they could take the poor and keep them poor and let the rich get richer. Doesn't that sound like today? Huh? People are taking laws and using them against us, but because we don't know the law, we can't fight them with the law. And you see this all the time. A police officer come up to a black person or anybody, and they say, "Well, the law says this, the law says that." If you notice, officers try to do it, be a smart aleck about it, but they say, "Oh, are you a lawyer?" Because if you say yes, they already know they done messed up, right? They can't outquote you because you're a lawyer. But if you're not, they gonna think you dumb and don't know the law. That's why it's important for you to know the law. And if you think you just got to fight with a police officer, have all the laws read there by you and say, "Officer, no problem. You want to know what law?" You quote right now, so both of us on the same page. So you ain't got to show up to court and fight it, and I ain't got to show up to court to try to fight it either, because you already told me. If you show me, I'm fine. It's not been because we need to know. We can't forget the way they do us now at the justice systems. We can't forget how they do us when they pull up behind us. We can't afford to forget. So we have to be on our best behavior regardless. And sometimes even when we know the law, we got to be able to say it in a calming way. Because we can't forget they are looking at us as a threat. We can't forget it. So while some people can obey some of the law, we got to obey all of the law. We can't forget. It also says right here in the Bible story, as seen in the creation story, disobedience to the simplest instruction can lead to dire consequences. And that's why I mentioned the police officers. All right, a lot of us, and I'm not saying it's right. The littlest instruction, the disobedience, step out of the car. Hey, get out this car. All right, leads to us getting gunned down in the car. All right, just a matter disobedience to where they see as a disobedience. Got to where we can't fight another day. And I'm not saying it, and I know what somebody will say. Well, Rev, you saying that wrong because it shouldn't have went down that way. It shouldn't have. It shouldn't. Because we see Fidel Castro, that didn't do nothing wrong. He still got gunned down. Was telling the officers, "Hey, look, I got a weapon in the car, but I got a license for a concealed weapon," and still got shot. So I'm saying sometimes when you're doing right, in their eyesight, you're still a threat. But because we can't forget that in their eyesight, we are a threat, we got to make sure we're doing everything we can to live to fight another day. And sometimes that means putting our pride aside, humbling ourselves, and being like, "You know what? Yes, sir. No, sir. You know why I pull you? No, sir, but you pulled me so I get ahead of you doing something. And I'm being a smart butt up and down. But I'm doing it in a nice way as I can. Because I know you weren't going to pull me for nothing. And you couldn't see that I was black while I was driving, so it had to be a reason you pulled me." Right? So, because a matter of disobedience, the simplest instruction can lead to dire consequences. It's sad, but it's so true. And this, what the writer is talking about, is totally different than what I'm talking about. All right? I'm talking about everybody being created equal. I'm talking about loving thy neighbor as I love thyself. But you got to realize a lot of people are not going to love you the way they love themselves. A lot of people think they're doing this in the name of the Lord. When you look at a lot of the lynchings and the cross burnings and all of that, they were killing us because they thought Jesus wanted us dead. When you look at cults, they're doing it because they think that's what they're supposed to do. But we can't forget. We can't afford to forget as Christians, as followers of Christ, not only what our ancestors did, but what our ancestors did. Because you realize if we are children of Christ, if we are brothers and sisters of Christ, that means Adam and Eve is our brothers and sisters. Adam and Eve are our ancestors. All right? That means Judas is our ancestor. That means Peter is an ancestor of mine. Right? So not only that, but Martin Luther King is my ancestor. You know, my great-grandma, great-grand is my ancestor. So I can't remember what my ancestors did, but I can't forget what my ancestors did. All right? So I got it bad both ways. All right? So we can't forget. And last thing I want to mention is this right here. That's Sankofa. Until the lion knows how to write, every story will glorify the hunter. Until the lion knows how to write, every story will glorify the hunter. Let me back up. As seen in the creation story, disobedience to the simplest instruction can lead to dire consequences. Until the lion knows how to write, every story will glorify the hunter. Tie both of them in. When the blue lights come behind you, that's the hunter. You're the lion. And until you're able to live to tell your story, it's going to be written in the eyes of the hunter. When we look at the story in the eyes of the hunter. When we look at Ahmaud Arbery, the story was written in the eyes of the hunter. When we look at Trayvon Martin, the story was written in the eyes of the hunter. So until the lion is able to write, you're always going to see the view from the hunter. Our history books, the history books, are written in the eyes of the hunter. So you got to realize when we're looking at stuff, a lot of the times it's written in the eyes of the hunter. Right? So we need to take a step back and say, well, what was I wonder how the lion felt in this story. Matter of fact, let me put myself. I can't put myself in the shoes of the lion, but I can try to put myself in the shoes of the lion. And imagine how they felt. So until the lion is able to tell the story, or write the story, it's always going to be in the eyes of the hunter. So I want to leave us with this thought this morning. Are you writing your story? Or are you allowing somebody else to write it? Are you writing your story? Or are you allowing somebody else to write it? And if you were to write your story, what would your story be? What would your story be? Can I take it break it down even more? If you was to write your obituary today, what would you write in your obituary about your story of who you were? Of who you were. And sometimes I think about that. I know Pastor Cal, let Brother River say, y'all might think he's crazy. But Pastor has sat down and thought about it. What are people going to say about me? Are people going to have to really get up and lie over me because I was really no good and they're trying to find nice things to say? Are they going to really truthfully have genuine things to say? All right? Are they going to have genuine things to say? And when they speak the truth, is it really going to be true? You know, if they thought I was mean, hey, don't sugarcoat. That's fine, because that's one person's view. But if you had to tell your story, what would your story be? Or would you say this? It's still more stuff I need to write. It's still more stuff I need to write. A lot of us going to say, there's still more stuff I need to write. Now, what if the Lord asks you that question? Why should you get into heaven? Why should I let you in? Are you going to say, Lord, it was still more stuff I need to do to get in? So in other words, if all of us are in the mindset that our story is not finished, right? Not because we want to continue to live, because in that case, all our story is not finished. Hope mine never ends, right? But if it did end tomorrow, two questions. This is the way we ask it. Supposing the Lord tell you you're going to die tomorrow, I'll give you the choice. Would you make it into heaven, or would you say there's still more work to do? And the second question, supposing you did die and the Lord asked you, why should you get into heaven? What would you say? In writing your story, will your story as it stands today get you into heaven? Or would it, without a doubt, get you into hell? If at the end of the day, if you're unsure, that's fine. Because truthfully, I could preach and say without a shadow of a doubt I know I'm going to heaven. But none of us never know. Right? None of us never know. But a lot of us should know that we ain't nowhere near heaven. Matter of fact, we in the first row of the devil's gospel choir. So we know that. Right? So the question is, what story do you want people to write about you? Right? Or better yet, why won't you start writing your own story? Then you ain't got to worry about what they write about you. We thank you. It is back in the hands of our superintendent.
Let's do the time. And certainly, I knew we had learned something this morning, because I certainly did, because that's a question that you have to really evaluate yourself. And it's a question that we should strive to do better, because we all fall short in certain area or a lot of areas. So let's think about that on our daily lives, and consider improving doing better. And announcement from the floor.
Hey, I want to say something about what you were saying about knowing the law and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I got stopped in Alabama one time, and the man asked me to say my alphabet backwards. Then he told me to count from 60 to 7 backwards. When I counted from 60 down past what he said, then I said, I went further than what you said, so I did it again.
Mm-hmm.
But I told him, I said, you don't know no school that teach you to say no alphabet backwards.
Mm-hmm.
I said, tell me what school that teach you to say your alphabet backwards. He couldn't say nothing.
They do all kind of crazy stuff to see how you were going to react. And that's some of the stuff that, I'm passed always briefing to us. You just can't fall for all those tricks they put out there for you. And the young black males, we have to
You got a pocket full of them.
teach them and be careful. But that's what it's all about.
And we always say at work, now you can't fall for the banana in the tailpipe.
But I'm glad you handle it that way. And you can pass that testimony on to some of the young people. Or anybody else. Well, I certainly enjoyed it, so pastor will talk about eating, so he made me get hungry.
You say over.
So we're ready for
I believe my AME Church School must grow and grow, and I was making it a top priority to make so. Every member a Christian, every Christian a worker, every worker trained, so a worker need not be ashamed. This we ask in Jesus' name. We have come, we have studied, we have learned. So until our next coming together to study God's word, may His rich blessings reside with you, and may His grace be eternally yours. Amen.
Oh, and they're doing,